I don't know why, but lately, especially with our downtime, having more downtime because of the COVID era, I've been more inspired to do these songs, and especially with everything that's going on. And a lot of the thoughts I'm expressing are things I might just tweet or respond to people online. I'm sick of that. I'm sick of getting into online arguments. I'm sick of tweeting into this echo chamber that, I know if I do one of these songs, people are going to hear what I want to say. Not everybody's going to want to hear what I say, but they're going to hear it. They're going to notice. Boy, do they notice.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Siobhán Cronin here with Cory Peza and Benny Goodman, and this is 2020. Welcome back to another amazing episode. Don't forget to subscribe at 2020-d.com. Go see all of our old episodes, watch on the YouTube cast. And this week we have a very special guest who I will let one of my cohorts introduce.
It's the one and only Alex Skolnick, who surprisingly came back for a second round.
Yeah, and it was nice to dive into some more opinion, writing stuff, talk a little bit more, because we interviewed him before. We got a lot of his background.
Yeah, he's brilliant in terms of navigating music, going from being in Testament and riffing, and then tackling the jazz world. So his perspective on music is fascinating, at least from where I'm sitting.
Riveting.
So before Ben goes and talks more, let's jump right in. Part 1 with Alex Skolnick.
Welcome to another episode of 2020. My name is Cory Peza here, as always, with Siobhán Cronin and Benny Goodman, and we are super pumped to welcome back to the show Mr. Alex Skolnick of the Skolnick Trio, Woo-hoo! Testament, the podcast Moods and Modes. Alex, how you been, man?
Good to be back, guys. I'm all right. Hello.
Yeah, it's super exciting to have you back. Since the last time you were on the show, I've been following you on Instagram and Facebook, and you're constantly releasing all sorts of great material, musically, intellectually. I've been listening to your podcast, which is awesome. So for anyone that hasn't listened, definitely check it out. Super interesting, a lot of great topics. Makes the drives go faster for me.
Oh, that's so great to hear. Thank you, Siobhán. Does anybody call you Shiv, like on my favorite show?
So some people do. A lot of people call me Sayo. My mom's whole mentality behind my name was to have something that couldn't be shortened. So all my friends in retaliation tried to shorten it every way possible just to piss her off. So
but now you've got Succession on HBO and that great character, Shiv.
Yeah, well, that's the reason some people know how to pronounce my name. Usually it's Siobhán, soybean, any various renditions of the spelling for people that don't understand Irish phonetics.
So now they know.
Now they know.
But thank you so much. That's great to hear. Really nice.
Yeah, no, your podcast is amazing. I mean, it's super well. I learned a lot just from listening to it. Very well produced, and really, it sounds so thought out. And the episode that I loved, it was you were talking about different songs that borrowed from past songs and how they changed it, and it was super cool. You make it really easy to understand, even if you're not a musician. So definitely, everyone go listen.
I've gotten a lot of feedback about that episode, and that was one I really threw together.
It didn't sound. It sounded like it was very well thought out. I mean, it didn't sound thrown together to me.
Because there's only been a couple so far. Like, I need to do an episode. Like, a month is going to go by. Like, I have to. I'm going to lose all my momentum. I've had these amazing guests. I've had Peter Frampton. I've had Pat Matheny. I've had, and I've had a lot of lesser known artists that I think more people should know about. But it's not just a one-on-one podcast. I mean, I also do a lot of commentary and play a lot of music. There's unfortunately had to be a lot of tribute episodes for recent people that passed away. The first one was Peter Green, and then really a short time after that, Eddie Van Halen. I'm like, okay, that's just going to be an elephant in the room if I don't do a podcast about Eddie Van Halen. Of course, that turns into a double episode because there's just I could do a week of episodes straight about Eddie Van Halen. I met Chick Corea. But anyway, so there's the tribute episodes. There are the guest episodes. There's been a few capturing the experience of music stores that I like, everything from like local places in Brooklyn to Sweetwater, which is, this online retail behemoth, the Amazon.com.
They send you candy. Music. What's wrong with someone sending you random? See, I feel like I live in a world though where I don't know if that's an okay thing anymore, because after the whole Anthrax scare, and I don't mean the band that you used to tour with, I feel like, is it okay to send from strangers candy?
Yeah.
If it comes with fancy new gear, it's okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
But
Sweetwater is no stranger. No
It's
stranger.
like Laffy Taffies and it's all like the old hard candies from the 50s.
Yeah. We talk about that on the podcast.
Yeah.
The candy.
You have a better memory than we do, apparently.
No, I'm saying on the Sweetwater episode.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you were talking about our prior episode. I'm like, okay.
No, yeah, that comes up. Like, why the candy? Why those kinds of candies? Like, how did that start? But that is a cool thing. And the Sweetwater episode was fun. The retrofit was fun. The very first episode I did was sort of not even planned. It was this crazy guitar repair guy who's a legend in New York, but he's such a character. I just thought if I could capture this guy and capture his voice and tell his story, this would be a great episode. And he let me record the whole experience. His name's Matt Umanoff. He had a store in Greenwich Village for a long time, still has a repair place. And anyway, so the podcast is, it's just turned into this whole cool thing, sort of, silver lining of 2020. Now it's 2022, and I've got some cool ones coming up. But the one you mentioned about borrowed music, that was one I had. It's like a backup. It's like, all right, if I don't know what else to do, I'll talk about these similarities of songs, and people love it. They want me to do a sequel, and so
that's how it works sometimes.
Yeah, I think I sent you an email because I had interviewed the legendary Carol Kaye. And one of her emails she wrote to me, she's like, well, he just stole this from that, and those are just the chords from Dixieland, and blah, blah, blah. Like, they've been doing that for years. And it's funny to hear you say that because, you introduce it, and for a lot of people, it's a new concept. But it's like Carol's like, oh, yeah, no, they were blatantly doing that in 1940. Benny Goodman was just ripping that stuff off, and he was just calling it bebop.
Oh, yeah.
And it's amazing. It's amazing to hear all these stories.
She's incredible. Yeah. And there are so many examples of that. I mean, it's kind of shocking. Yeah, I'm sure somebody like her, she's an expert on that.
Well, and everyone, I'll say this in front of you because you'll appreciate this. Everyone will appreciate this. So I always make fun of music theory knowledge, and I'm there with Carol Kaye, and she goes, Betty, do you know what a G13 chord is? Yeah. And I always say the 13th chord. I always say that because that sounds like the evil. I'm like, I think so, and she goes, yeah. Well, what other chord is it? And I'm just staring at her. She's like, it's a D9, Betty. It's a D9. She's like, you don't know jazz, you know nothing. And normally that would have been the end of the interview, but I start laughing at her. And I start saying, you're right, I don't know jazz. And that's why I have you. And you can see this cantankerous, like, oh, there's hope for this rocker guy. It was great.
Yeah, it's also a D7.
Well, depending on the context, as I've been told.
Yeah. So I would have answered her different, but I would have said it's a dominant 7th chord. It could be, you could voice it as a D7, a D9, or a D13.
Well, she said that if you...
True.
Well, but you have perspective, Ben doesn't. So that's the difference.
And the thing I learned, too, is that the C7 flat 5 chord is the most important conjoining chord to anything in music, is what she told me. She's like, if you know anything, learn the C7 flat 5 chord. Okay.
Oh, that's interesting.
She said, well, the flat, the 5, the C7 flat 5 and the 9. She said, it gets you back to wherever you want to go. Her word was voila.
Yeah, I mean, they're important chords, but
you're hearing immense knowledge filtered through decades of
For
marijuana.
some bullshit.
and
Yeah.
Nothing.
I see.
Nothingness.
I see.
Totally terrible.
But we look forward to hearing the interview from Ben there, or we can hear it right from the horse's mouth per se. But
Right.
She makes a lot of fun of me.
But coming back to your podcast, not to interrupt you, Cory, but I'm curious to hear us as still kind of new podcasters. How do you get your ideas, or is it kind of like the music creation process where something comes to you and you're like, oh, I want to do an episode about that, or how do you kind of plan out, what you're going to do in terms of content and how you go about interviewing people or kind of uncovering their essence, their personality when you finally put an episode together?
Yeah, well, it happens in different ways. Like I said about the debut episode, it was very accidental. I was getting my guitars repaired at this legendary guitar shop. And the guy who runs the repair shop, Matt Ivanov, is such a character. And you'll hear him in the podcast in the first episode. He's hilarious. And I just this is straight out of a TV show, like great writing, except he's real. He's just riffing. So that was totally accidental. As far as musicians, I mean, I had a list of musicians that I had in mind in the beginning. Originally, I thought it was going to be more like the show Piano Jazz, which was NPR's longest running show. That's where Marian McCartland would sit with another piano player, and they would sit and just play music, talk about music, talk shop. It's a great show. It's easy to find online. But I thought, okay, kind of a guitar version of that. So I recorded several jam sessions with New York musicians. A great guitar player named Nir Felder. Another great guitar player, Prasanna, who's a Carnatic guitar player. So he connects the sounds of India with guitar playing. Another one, Rez Abazi, who's he's Pakistani and kind of has that influence, but he's also like a downbeat readers poll and critics poll winner. He's like kind of at the top of the sort of elite modern jazz scene. So like I know all these really interesting people, just sort of being based in New York and the music scene. Originally the idea is, okay, they're going to come over here. We're going to sit with guitars. I'm going to record off the amps and combine it into a show. And then, of course, COVID happens. So being in the same room is impossible. So by the time I launched the podcast, I thought, okay, well, I had a few of these jam sessions that I'd already done. And I needed to do something. I needed to figure out a way to have content without having people over. So, and then of course by now, Zoom is a thing as we are talking now.
We've leaned very heavily in that direction. Yes.
Yeah. And I realized, okay, well, this is actually great because now I'm not limited to New York musicians. That was kind of the original idea. It was just going to be like a window into New York and, the music scene here. And once I started incorporating Zoom, I realized, okay, I can talk to somebody anywhere, and then maybe we can't jam together, but I can play clips of their music or whatever music we're talking about in the episode. And I also realized, I want to do it in a way that is like the podcasts that I like to listen to. So it's an audio only podcast. I think we are going to be putting the episodes up on YouTube at some point, but I don't record it video the way we're doing here. It's really just for listening, not for watching. And the podcasts I like to listen to they're like that, and they're like short stories. So I have a bunch of favorite, like I really liked the Serial podcast.
Oh yeah, that was great.
It was awesome.
Yeah, I loved that one.
I loved how it was produced. Obviously, this is very different. This is not about somebody who's in jail, and
right.
this is about music, but I like the storytelling aspect that
absolutely, yeah,
that show had. This American Life.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few others, and there are so many just one-on-one conversations where it's just, and I'm okay talking, but I'm actually I think I can do much better storytelling and creating something that's different. So the podcast reflects that.
And in that style, like how much preparation, pre-production are you doing? Or is it a lot of more in the post side of getting a ton of stuff, to tape, so to say, and then putting together the story? Or do you kind of have an idea from the beginning of the episode how you want to put it together?
Well, I should give a shout out to Osiris Media, because they're a really good music podcast network. They came on board a few episodes in. They were just listening. We've been listening. We really like what you're doing, and we have a partnership, and it's really helped having them. I still do most of the production myself, but I send it to them, and if some of the voices maybe have too much mid-range or some technical aspect, they have a team that helps with that.
Wait, Cory works there too? Okay.
And then
everyone needs a Cory.
Yeah, well, it helps, so you can hear the difference between the first few episodes that I did all on my own and the ones that they do. They just kind of polish it a little more, they neaten it up. But it's really, when I send it to them, it's very close to how you're going to hear it. But also Kirsten Cluthy, who's one of the founders, and she's great for bouncing ideas. So we'll speak every few weeks or so, and we'll just talk about the upcoming episodes, and I see what she thinks about some of my ideas. She's had a few ideas, and it really helps me just to know that there are other people sort of counting on this.
Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
I have a really
incentive.
important question, because I feel like you're always like, I don't know if I should admire you more for your photography skills, for your oration, for the fact that you've conquered this metal unicorn, but then gone over to this jazz thing. But I want to know, because one of the things I love about you is that you're just such a brilliant mind, and getting to know you, finding out your parents, happen to be professors at Yale, are not necessarily, you're not the smartest one necessarily in the family, even though you're the most brilliant guy that I know.
Far from it.
Right. Yeah. So I can tell you're still the dumb one at the table, but you're still smarter than everybody that walks outside. Tell me this. What the fuck is going on outside? Because every time there's wind outside, I feel like it's the end of the world, and I kind of want your opinion on it.
Yeah, that's something I can't really help you with. Not my specialty.
Are you sure?
There is a
your music seems to suggest you know about these things.
Oh, there is a thing called climate change, but that's
climate change.
There's people way more knowledgeable about that than me. So,
well, let's okay. Not to. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, back to.
I meant philosophically. Is it like the end of Ghostbusters 2, where all the spirits of New York, and all we need to do is actually combine together to sing with the Statue of Liberty and bring the soul music back, so we could kill all the slime?
I think we are going through a very strange time period, and it's kind of interesting, which we can get into later. But just to finish up about. The podcast preparation of, most of that comes to me as I'm walking around and just thinking about it. And say if there's a musical artist, for example, I'll think about that person's work and what I want to say about it, what songs I want to show. So I had one recently with Divinity Rocks, who's this great bass player. She's like a top call bass player. She was Beyonce's bass player for years. She also has a children's album out, which is totally, but it's great. It's like children's music that adults can just really get into. It's actually great music. And so with her, it was sort of thinking about that. Okay, what songs of hers do I want to grab? And then I try to prepare them. I try to have all the content all the musical content, all the samples beforehand, before I start doing my thing. And so there's several there's several steps to the process. Or the borrowed music episode that we talked about. I was constantly thinking of examples. It's just anytime I had an idea, just write that down. Okay, what is that? Okay, I need to grab the theme from Fame by Irene Cara. I need to grab No Doubt, Don't Speak, because I think they're the same song. And sure enough, I've always thought that, and then looking at it, they're in the same key. In fact, they're so similar. And then that becomes interesting. Okay, what are the differences? What are the similarities? And somehow, that's really resonated with a lot of people. Even since doing that episode, so many more have come to mind. And,
absolutely. And I feel like this happens to me as, a violinist that'll go out and play gigs, randomly someone requests a song, and halfway through the song, I realize I'm playing the melody to another song, and I'm like, oh, wait, same key, same chord progression. And of course, similar, right? Now with a lot of the pop songs, so much of it, to me, feels kind of formulaic in a lot of ways. So it becomes harder to distinguish.
Yeah, absolutely.
Didn't you say on one podcast or something that you had a professor, or maybe it was Richard Shaw, who's an amazing guitarist, a friend of the show from Cradle of Filth, who said that he had a professor.
Who's on your record.
That said, it played with you. That he had a professor that came in and who was a famous guitarist and said that if you had heard, if you were writing music that people hadn't heard yet, it wouldn't resemble music. Because it's literally all been done, and that if you were creating something that was genuinely new, people wouldn't recognize it even as music. It'd be indiscernible from what we in computers music. And I thought that was very interesting because that's totally right. Because everything I do, I wrote something recently, and one of my buddies said, that sounds like Mr. Big, which I thought was awesome that they could accuse me of stealing from Paul Gilbert. Like, great, that guy's way better than me. And I went and actually figured it out, and I found my song sounded more like Mott the Hoople and Queen. I found 17 other songs I blatantly ripped off before even the song my friend was suggesting.
Yeah,
it was upsetting. Yeah, it's upsetting how much everything sounds the same.
There's a lot of overlap, and there's ways of getting into. I actually had a really interesting conversation about this with Michael League, who's the founder of Snarky Puppy, bass player, but also producer.
What a cool band.
And amazing band, amazing musician, just, really, making things happen, just really, and he's got some great ideas about music. And we were talking about this. I mean, he thinks that, it's pretty difficult to find a completely original idea, but it's what you do with it, because there's only 12 notes. Everything has probably been done. It doesn't matter how original you think your idea is, but if you do notice a similarity, then you need to change it, and it's in that changing where interesting things happen, and you can actually get really creative based on an existing song.
Well, that's what's awesome about Snarky Puppy, because when I first heard them, they're so out there. Like, there's this progressive fusion band that's kind of live with all these amazing players, and it's so free. It's exactly what I wanted to do with Lost Symphony. I thought there was a band out there, because it's this doesn't conform to fucking anything. Nothing. And all the playing is ridiculous, and it's all organic, and it's beautiful. But it's one of those things, they don't have to worry about coming out with another single. All they need to do is keep being what they are, which is this fucking amalgamation of incredible musicians, clearly spearheaded by this dude. Because when I watched that the first time, I literally over and over went back to that. I'm like, this is so unique. And I realized then that's what I like about music now, is when it sounds different to me, when it doesn't sound like it's blatantly contrived, or I go, I heard a Chris Cornell song, Flutter Girl, earlier, and I realized, you go back to that record, it has the craziest chord progressions that sound like literally nothing I've ever heard in my entire life. And that's one of those things where every song sounds the same, but when you hear one that's a little bit different, like a Snarky Puppy in a world of Future and Drake, it's
Yeah.
Has there ever been a point, throughout your career where you got a record to tape and later on you're listening and you're going, you know what? I think I sniped that little lick right there without realizing.
It certainly happened with guitar licks, especially early on. Yeah, I could point to guitar licks and I could say, oh, you know what? Randy Rhoads does like almost the same thing, or Michael Schenker does. But those are guys I was listening to all the time.
But Randy Rhoads did almost the same thing as Michael Schenker, because if you go and read any of his interviews, he's like, Michael Schenker's awesome, even when he was alive. And you hear where all of those guys come from, because they come from the same thing. They were all listening to the same thing that led to that at that beautiful time in history.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, during my tribute episode to Van Halen, one of the things I spoke about was like, he's one of the few people, it's very hard to connect his licks with anything. Some of the riffs, absolutely. You could say, "And the Cradle Will Rock." Okay, that's Saturday Night Special by Skynyrd. Hot for Teachers, basically ZZ Top, LaGrange sped up. But solo-wise, it's so original. And I found one lick where it's like, okay, I know exactly where he got this. And it's amazing. I played them back to back, and it's kind of crazy. It's obscure. I mean, nobody would ever know, but it's...
Was it Holdsworth or something?
Yeah, it's Holdsworth.
Yeah, he loved Holdsworth.
Yeah, I think we dove into this a little bit in the last episode.
Oh, yeah.
That was the incredible find, like you mentioned.
Well, I think his technique, you could definitely listen to Alan Holdsworth in the 70s and say, well, okay, yeah, Alan Holdsworth, he's one of the only people doing that type of approach. So, but he still never, I never heard a lick where I said, okay, that's a Holdsworth lick, until this one lick. And it's, of all songs, it's on Beat It, which is one of the most listened to songs on the planet. And the lick comes from Alan Holdsworth as a sideman with Jean-Luc Ponty on an album called Enigmatic Ocean. In the 70s, it's just this one. So there's lots of Holdsworth solos on that record. There's lots of violin solos on that record. But this one lick, it's like, oh my God, there it is. There's that lick. He throws it in. And of course, he does all kinds of other stuff, all the stuff that, Eddie stuff that you can't really connect to anything else. And it's fine. But it's just, that was almost like discovering gold. Yeah. A Van Halen lick, that sounds, you can tell where he got it from.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming back to, since we were still kind of talking about your podcast, it's amazing to hear you have kind of, it almost sounds like a scholarly approach with a lot of the things you do. It's like when you were talking about crafting an episode, it reminds me of being in university and writing essays, and I have to remember this citation and go find my samples here. When you're producing, exactly. when you're producing, which it sounds like you're really producing yourself in these episodes, do you have like an ultimate, kind of like an essay, an ultimate point that you're trying to make when you're approaching an episode or when you're interviewing somebody? Is there something that you're looking for to kind of be your final statement when you're crafting all these samples around an episode?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's difficult to envision exactly how it's going to turn out. In fact, I'm not that good with that. I'm not really good at planning so much. I mean, I may have some points in mind that I want to make. I may have some clips that I definitely want to share and some samples. But as far as like the overall arc, that happens while I'm doing it, and it makes it even
like
more
an editing process, or when you're doing the interviews. Like, at what point is this happening?
I don't think about it during the interviews.
Okay.
The interviews, they're pretty much unplanned. Maybe I'll make a couple notes about things I want to touch on, or maybe some direct questions, or sometimes, it's just a conversation that happens. Once the conversation happens, I always have a conversation that's like the length of the podcast, at least. The podcast averages about an hour. And I usually speak to somebody for around an hour. There's no way I'm going to use the whole conversation. So I just pick out my favorite bits of the conversation as I listen back. And then once I have those bits, well, each one of those bits inspires something else. It might inspire a sample. Oh, right here, I should go to this piece of music. Or right here, I should jump in and do a commentary. But I don't know. And as that's happening, as I'm getting those ideas, I'll make notes, and then at some point, I have my favorite parts of the interview. I have my notes about what I want to comment on. I may even have some of the samples that I want to play of music, and then I jump in, and then I play the opening music. And then I hear an opening, and then I just start riffing on an opening. And then once I have the opening, that kind of sets up the next part and sets up the next part. But it's very, it's very unplanned. It's very, it's not completely spontaneous, but a lot of it just happens. It's the creative process in action.
Sure. Do you find
I'll just say that I've never been great about, writing a solid outline and, planning things too much.
Right. Well, that's interesting you brought that up because I wanted to ask about if there was any overlap in the process between, podcasts and writing your book, because that's obviously like a long format sort of thing. And we probably touched on this in the last episodes with you, but what was that process like in terms of compiling everything and creating an arc for the book compared to, a podcast episode?
It was actually very similar, and it probably would have gone a lot faster if I had been more methodical.
Okay.
And done more planning. But instead, it's like, okay, I feel like writing about this. I've got these ideas. I'm just going to write a whole bunch, and then I'll shape up this. Okay, now I have this section. And it was just a bunch of these inspired writing sessions. And then at a certain point, I started saying, okay, well, this should go before this. This should go before this. And then just while that's going on, I'm moving things around, and then you move things around, then you have to adjust, because if you have one chapter going into the next chapter, that there has to be some kind of continuity. And eventually I had these chapter after chapter with sort of a thread, but it didn't start out that way. It didn't. Every chapter probably got moved around a bunch, and it probably took much more time than it should have. But I think having done it, I have a much better idea about the process, and it is very similar to what happens with the podcast. And I think if I do it again, I think I'll probably be I'll use a little more planning, because I think planning is good, but you can't stick to a plan too much. I mean, I think
don't you think
a lot of artists get into trouble that way.
But Don't you think with someone like Pat Matheny, you know what I mean, or even Peter Frampton, or even talking about Eddie Van Halen, you must have been thinking about this your entire life. I can imagine that you've been thinking all those questions that you asked, all of your life, because those guys are just so Peter Frampton. I mean, I always think of Wayne's World, where he's that used to come with free samples of Time. You know what I mean? Because it was such a ubiquitous record. Even as a kid, I knew about Peter Frampton, even though he hadn't had a hit in 25 years.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always. It's funny because just growing up, I told them this. Hey, I had to see your face every single day because I had an older brother that had that record, and it was always out. And but also he was played, even though you're right, he hadn't had a hit in a long time. But I don't know if it's like that where all you live, but in the San Francisco Bay Area, the classic rock radio stations got kind of locked in to this period of music from, I don't know, maybe late 60s to kind of mid 80s. And even though they would sort of sometimes include something new, for the most part, that music stayed. So
yeah, I noticed that there was like the sliding scale of classic rock kind of just froze in a certain era, where it was like maybe there was just, you know, radio stations don't like to have too big of a playlist, so they're like, you know what, we got enough here. It's gonna be very difficult to break in after this certain period.
Yeah, it's kind of the same everywhere.
Yeah.
I think, right? Kansas, Foreigner, Styx.
Yep.
Yeah,
Well,
Led
it's funny
Zeppelin.
we're friends with John Garabedian, who is one of the greatest DJs in history, and he's still like, oh yeah, no, the Beatles stuff, they don't resonate at all on modern. Like, which actually, you don't really hear the Beatles other than on those specific Beatles stations, because for some reason, people who are obsessed with the Beatles go and listen to the Beatles, but it's not like Pearl Jam, Even Flow, which is just lives forever, or Genuine Pony, like just a song that you're like, wow, that song is still on the radio, but like there are these random songs like that you hear and you're just like, wow, that's the one that is forever.
Well, so Peter Frampton, yeah, when I was in high school, for example, yeah, he like had kind of dropped off the face of the earth. Like but you still heard those songs on the radio. You would hear, Do You Feel Like We Do?
Ooh, baby, I love your way.
Yeah, all those songs. You would hear them in between Zeppelin and Boston and Steve Miller, all that stuff. It was, you know, and they didn't always play the extended version, but like the extended version of Do You Feel Like We Do has this really cool solo, and he does some very cool stuff.
Talkbox craziness.
It's talkbox crazy, but even when he doesn't have the talk box, yeah, he does that. He does a whole part. There's a whole section without the talk box too, and he's got some licks on there, and it's like, okay, I could tell he's listened to jazz guitar at some point. So I used to think, yeah, if I ever meet this guy, this is what I will ask him. And sure enough, yeah, we had a huge talk about George Benson, which is kind of how we first connected somehow, because one of my many pandemic projects was to do a transcription of my favorite George Benson solo and put it online. And I'm not sure how he got word of it, but he saw it and he contacted me and flipped. And he said, yeah, he used to listen to that record all the time. And him and his keyboardist for The Herd, which was one of his first bands, they used to pretend they were George Benson and Lonnie Smith, Benson's keyboard player. And it was really cool. So yes, exactly, to get back to your point, yeah, I got to ask him these questions that I always imagined asking him. And I've spent so much time with Matheny's music, and I had just the questions write themselves. And that was an incredible experience, just talking to him.
Does Rick Beato make you angry because he gets to everybody cool first? Because I feel like we all get his leftovers. We had like Miles Kennedy one day after, like, oh, we got Miles Kennedy. Like, Rick Beato has Miles Kennedy. I'm like, fuck. And of course, he's like better looking. He's a way better guitarist than I am. Like that. He's like, and like this. And I'm like, what did you just do? I don't know what a hexatagonal fucking octave scale is. What the fuck?
Yeah,
that guy's amazing.
I've taken the approach.
Shut it off and watch him now.
If you can't beat him, join him.
Yeah.
There you go. So I've quoted him. His Matheny interview was great, and he went into details about certain songs that it was great. There's somebody like Matheny, there's so much to talk about that there's room for all of us. And I was really interested in Matheny's outside, kind of, you could even say controversial music, because, and it's a strange word to use with Pat Metheny, because he's like just the nicest person on the planet. But he I think he's the only one I could think of that's done instrumental music that's controversial, which he got a kick out of. Yeah. And Beato, his interview is so good, but he doesn't get into any of that. So I was actually glad that came out first, because then I thought, okay, this kind of gives me some room. I'm gonna get it. I know some different territory that nobody talks to him about, and he's done a bunch of these records that have like practically caused riots among his fans. Almost got him dropped from record labels. At a certain point, people started accepting it. It's like, okay, we don't understand this. Like, he's one of our most successful artists. We love his work. Every now and then he has to do some project that's just causes people to lose their minds. Like, what is this? And it's a lot of it is noise, but we had a great discussion about it. I mean, there is meaning behind it. There is meaning behind all these sort of noise projects that he does, and for every one of those he's done, there's way more that are just totally like listenable and accessible, sometimes radio friendly.
It reminds me of classical music, not to interrupt you, but yeah, it's like I look back at classical music history in Stravinsky, where there was riots over the Rite of Spring, and then it became like a part of the traditional canon of classical music, and like Schoenberg with like 12 tones, and some of it's unlistenable, and then some of it's like the most romantic, beautiful, like multi-level string parts that you've ever heard. So it's pretty wild.
Don't forget Bill Haley in the comments. Remember Bill Haley, Rock Around the Clock? They rock so hard, they like literally knock someone's clock off. That was the first riot.
Okay.
1955, I believe, was Rock Around the Clock. Bill Haley in the comments.
Stravinsky's riot. Stravinsky's riot was way before that.
But that wasn't rock and roll, though.
It was.
That was the rock and roll of the day.
That was metal. Right. No, that wasn't rock and roll. That was metal.
Well, that was like progressive, very progressive. But yeah, I mean, I guess
you need theater of the day.
No, but it's interesting, because what is it that about music that's like, how is it controversial? What makes it controversial? I mean, I don't understand. Like, how do we define that?
Well, I guess because if you listen in Matheny's case, if you listen to some of his music, particularly his early '80s music with the Pat Metheny group, it's so. You could imagine it on vacation. You could imagine not that, and it's much better than a lot of music they'll play on vacation. I'm not comparing it to like easy listening jazz or whatever, but a lot of like contemporary jazz radio stations like adopted it because it fit, even though it is really sophisticated when you listen to it. So he got this fan base that started following him because of his music that was easy to listen to, and somebody could listen to Matheny on this radio station that would next play, I don't know, Spyro Gyra or the Rippingtons or all good. Those are all good musicians too. It's just, it's very
accessible.
You could hear it in a hotel lobby and it would be fine. But so some of those, the fans of those music, those types of songs would go to hear Pat Metheny, and he's doing this stuff that's just like, very challenging listening, on the level of Schoenberg and I think I would argue beyond Stravinsky. Boulez.
Sure.
Even beyond that. And the way he described it was fascinating, and he's so genuine too. Like, because you could tell, like he is not concerned with the reaction. Like, I think he did those shows, and his fans walked out. He did a famous show at the Knitting Factory in New York, and it was part of a group, but his name was announced the same day, because they knew as soon as his name's announced, it'll sell out. And sold out crowd. I think, I'm not sure what this place held. I think like between 500 and 1,000 people. It wasn't a huge venue, but pretty decent sized theater. By the end of that show, there were 30 people in the audience, and he didn't leave that. What have I done? Oh my God! He does not care.
Yeah.
And he's also the most, I believe he's the most Grammy nominated and Grammy winning jazz artist of all. He does not care. He's really like, it's so interesting. He said to me, I don't know why they react one way to this and why I don't concern myself with it. He's really coming from a place, and it's really cool to learn from this as an artist, because who hasn't thought about what people will think of your music?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Has anybody here? Hello, I admit it. We all have. What will they think if I do this? And that's not on his radar. So it was amazing. So I was able to get into these areas that Rick Beato doesn't go into, but I also quoted Rick Beato because he did a great commentary about the Led Zeppelin lawsuit, and that was I did a very quick segment on that on my episode on borrowed music.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
and it was great. So Rick Beato's kicking everyone's ass, but we can learn from his podcast. We can borrow small clips of it. I don't get the sense he minds at all, and and I'm glad he's doing what he's doing.
Yeah. So that's an amazing story. And I guess coming back to you, maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the other things you've done over the past couple of years, because you also, at least from what I see on social media, say what you think and what you feel, and you release what you want without a seeming care of whether people are going to like it or not like it, which is great. And it's super, especially in the atmosphere of cancel culture and everyone worrying about what they're going to say, and is this going to affect my career because I said the wrong thing? Like, how do you navigate that, and how has that influenced some of the things that you've done over the past couple years in this creative process in the quarantine?
Yeah, I can't think about it too much, because if I think about, the 90s hip hop song, I mean, what are they going to think about that? I'll get so consumed with that. Mm-hmm. So I've managed to separate myself. A 90s hip hop song.
Yeah, the B.I.G. L.I.E.
Very, that's, I mean, it shouldn't be controversial. I think everything in it's undeniable. But okay, you can say, is it about politics? Sure, it's political, so that's going to be controversial. It's rap. It's certainly like, I'm not trying to launch a rap career like some insinuate I am. I'm doing it. In fact, my latest episode of Moods and Modes is all about that song and how it came to be, the inspirations behind it. Before I joined a band and wanted to play screaming guitar, I was listening to comedy radio. There was a radio show that was on once a week called the Dr. Demento Show. And
Dr. Demento.
Yeah, this artist that nobody had heard of at the time, Weird Al Yankovic, did songs for that show. That's how he got his start. So I would hear his songs just on accordion. He didn't even have a band. This is before videos. I'm like 11 years old at this time. And it was Monty Python songs. It was also my gateway to Frank Zappa, because he would play some of the funny Frank Zappa songs. And I thought, Frank Zappa's a comedian. I need to, but the music's really interesting. And I got curious about Frank Zappa. And then, of course, I found out there's so much more to Frank Zappa. But that was how I found out about him. Because I used to hear him on the same radio program where I would hear Weird Al Yankovic. back when nobody knew who he was. So I think that planted a seed, and I've always come up with funny songs. I try to only share them if I think they're funny, but or I'll share them with close friends, and if they crack up, then it's funny. And this song, I knew this would be funny. I knew it would anger some people because of my previous songs, but I wasn't thinking about it. I just thought it would be funny and it would make a point.
So one part Dare to Be Stupid and one part Joe's Garage, because that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of things. I mean,
that's a great song, by the way. Dare to Be Stupid. It's such a great song by Weird Al Yankovic. Do you know that song?
Yeah. I don't know if I know that one. I like his original stuff. Stupid.
It was in the Transformers soundtrack, which launched that dude. What's his name? Who was in White Snake? He played in the band Lion, not White Lion, and they did the Transformers song. But yeah, Dare to Be Stupid was 1985. I think he was nominated for a Grammy because he lost on Jeopardy.
Yes.
Baby.
That's been so long. I forgot about that one.
I love Weird Al Yankovic. I've seen him like 10 times. He's one of the greatest performers on the planet, and his band's ridiculous. I love Weird Al Yankovic.
I've never seen him live. I need to see him live.
Incredible, dude. He started the show on the street. And he started playing from literally on the street in Boston outside the Wilbur Theater, and literally walked like he's walking through the bathroom the whole night, and he literally was doing it. And it blew my mind. He had more costume changes than Britney Spears. All right, and Ray,
he's a genius.
He's amazing.
He's a genius.
Genius.
I heard Another One Rides the Bus. That was like one of the first songs by him I heard. My Bologna. And then that was the first big video he had. But he also always had these originals that were hilarious. He had a song called The Punk Polka, which is amazing. If you hear that, just on accordion. Weird Al, Zappa, and over the years this has always been there. And I don't know why, but lately, especially with our downtime, having more downtime because of the COVID era, I've been more inspired to do these songs, and especially with everything that's going on. And a lot of the thoughts I'm expressing are things I might just tweet or respond to people online. I'm sick of that. I'm sick of getting into online arguments. I'm sick of tweeting into this echo chamber that, I know if I do one of these songs, people are going to hear what I want to say. Not everybody's going to want to hear what I say, but they're going to hear it. They're going to know that. Boy, do they notice.
What about Florida Man? That was the Florida Man Blues. I think Siobhán should relate to that.
That one. That was one I had in my head for a long time, and that song was actually recorded pre-COVID. I did that in late 2019, along with a couple other blues songs that still haven't seen the light of day, but they're there. And I was going to add on to it and either do a blues LP or a full blues recording with special guests who are blues artists. And then, of course, the whole thing got complicated because of COVID. So, but we had that song recorded, and I just thought, okay, that one, there's really no room for a special guest anyway. The song sounds good. Let's just put it out. And my friend Adam Dubin, who is a director, he's currently working with Metallica, but he did A Year in the Life of Metallica. He co-directed the Beastie Boys. So Fight for Your Right to Party, these classic videos. So he's got some history.
That video was made for like $600.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding. That's like the greatest video ever, by the way.
Oh yeah, amazing.
I love that video and that song and that record and that band. So
yeah, so he loved Florida Man blues, and he just volunteered. He's like, if you do a video, please think of having me direct it. I was like,
no shit, that's fucking awesome, man.
No brainer.
Yeah, we'll toss the links to both these videos we're talking about in the description below.
Yeah, it was fun. So the song was recorded in 2019, video shot last July. I actually shot both of these videos in the same month. It was kind of crazy. But I was really glad I got to do them because I have a feeling that once touring starts up again, it's going to be nuts. We'll see if things get moved. But just looking at my calendar, for this year already, it's like, okay, April and most of May, I'm on tour with the Bay Strikes Back tour, Testament, Exodus, and Death Angel. We're doing a bunch of summer festivals. So most of July and part of August, I'll be there. I think we're doing more U.S. dates in September. There's another possible tour being worked on in November, and then in between the windows of, I'm getting booked with other projects. From my trio to this great instrumental project with Percy Jones, the legend from the 70s, incredible fretless bass player. So yeah, things are filling up really quick. So I have a feeling like it's a good thing I did those videos last year, because I think this year they take time. They take time to edit, to shoot, to plan the shoot.
And just while you mentioned it, with touring, coming back and going back to that kind of shift in lifestyle, how is that mentally for you after having this time? Has this been like a good respite, but now you're ready to really get back to, that life?
I don't know. I have to be careful how I answer.
Why now? We're not careful.
Well, I of course I'm looking forward to performing again and being out there, but I'm a little surprised that I'm not like restless. I was sure, if you told me 2 years ago what was going to happen and how just the majority of tour dates would be moved and postponed, I would think that at this point I would be stir crazy, just itching to get out there and get on it. And I'm kind of like, I'm fine either way.
Mm-hmm.
I can relate to that. I feel like touring is sort of a different form of existence. And at least for me, when I get home from it, it is very exciting. But then when I get home from it, it takes a while to adjust to sort of that different creative muscle that is being at home and, going after different projects and ideas and running around with different types of people and kind of getting that experience of just other things that are around, and I think it almost takes time for that mental shift, and so you get in the rhythm of touring nonstop all the time, and then you don't realize what it's like to not be doing that for a while until you shift.
I like the freedom of not being on tour. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, we started this recording at 8:30, right? That's normally when a show would start. But on a typical night at 8:30, I don't have to lock myself in a room for an hour or 2 hours and just get into this headspace and get my fingers up to where they need to be for, you know what I mean? If I want to grab my acoustic guitar or even sit at the piano, I can do that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, so it's going to be weird not being able to do that.
Do you think that, because I feel like one of the things that COVID has done for a lot of people is make you question your quality of life versus what you were just doing? Because I know what I was doing, I was making money, but it wasn't necessarily the quality of life. So now I'm like much more interested in doing like my art. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm just going to do what I want because like the world's ending. So I might as well do it now. Like, do you think there's something amazing about being able to just come downstairs and create when you want to. So it's different being on that mental kind of like circadian rhythm versus going on tour every single night where you're giving to people. Do you think that maybe it's time that you're just like taking creatively for yourself to get all these things out and talk to Pat Matheny and hang out with, you know, your idols and nerd out because that's what you do?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I guess I like what I've been able to do during this time.
I love it.
It hasn't been this down period and, you know, I don't know what to do with it's like there's been so many cool things to do. So yeah, I am kind of wrestling with it. I'm sure I'll enjoy it once I'm out there. But yeah, you're right. You know, what Siobhán says, it's a different rhythm. It's a different existence. And that it takes some getting used to. Suddenly there's people around all the time.
That sounds absolutely awful at this point. Getting used to know people. We're coming to the end of our first hour, part one, with Alex Skolnick. Thank you for hanging with us as always. You know, we'll see where the next hour takes us. You know, we're not playing by any rules for this show. You know, we can go wherever.
Moods and modes.
Yes.
Submit Alex Skolnick Trio. Alex likes to rap. I mean, there's a lot of things. He says things. He takes great pictures, sometimes in focus, sometimes not in focus around New York City. It's awesome. You write these little soliloquies, like these little one-offisms of your mind all the time. I love it. I'm like, this guy has an internet connection, but as opposed to like, let's say a previous president, which I don't really need to get political, but like who would just fire off these non-wittyisms. You like everything you write. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like, it's like if someone that was woke that was smart and not like woke, but just smart. Take away the woke and just smart and present. That's you. You're just smart and present, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm not that. I mean, I think what woke used to mean, I like that, but I'm not totally
It's
crazy
been diluted. It's over.
What it's become, yeah.
No longer woke is being woke. It's been taken.
But then, yeah, the anti-woke thing is not great either. So, yeah, it's...
Too many terms for me to remember.
You know, who knows where it's going to land. We can pick this up in part two. But guys, check out 2020-d.com, and we'll see you on the next one.
Dreaming is a big part of it, too. It's like the title track of this record, of the Ides of March, was the genesis of it happened in as I was coming out of a dream state, you know, just beyond the blue horizon, and I was like, my eyes opened up, and I was like, it's kind of early, and it's cold, it's January, and I don't want to get up, but I knew it was an important one. I was like, oh, man, just get up, go in the little family room area and grab a guitar and record it and real quickly and then go back to bed. So oftentimes the ones that end up becoming important are kind of in that space.